Welcome to The Founder's Mind, a podcast powered by the Goodall Group. On this episode, we have Kate Goodall, co-founder and CEO of Halcyon. Take a listen as Kate shares about her journey in growing Halcyon. Kate, thank you for joining me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you.
Thank you. This is fun.
On the show. And I think a great starting point and where I tend to start most of the conversations is just, for the listeners, a little bit, what is Halcyon? What's going on here? What are you working on?
So Halcyon is a place that provides space, community, and access to talented social entrepreneurs and civic-minded artists from around the world. Bit of a mouthful. And really what that breaks down to is we are very interested in really making impactful social and environmental change as we are all feeling out this 21st century and the depth and complexity of all of the problems we know are there, and trying to come up with some scalable ways to address some of those problems. And certainly, we see business as a way to quickly address some of those problems given its ability to scale quickly. Mm-hmm. So that's what really drew us to social entrepreneurs in terms of hoping to be able to move the needle on some of these things. And artists, because if you look at, any major historical movement, art is there somewhere, right? The way that camera brought attention to the horrors of war, the way that Arnie Riefenstahl was deployed by Hitler to make documentary film and propaganda, the way that, you could really look at Picasso's Guernica. I mean, there's just really so much that you can point to in terms of the way that art plays a role in changing the world as well. So we're trying to find interesting creators who can take a concept from nothing to something, and hopefully we can help them either do that more effectively or faster or better. So they come here and they live with us. The entrepreneurs get 5 months in this place, and the artists actually get 9 months.
Nice. Down
the street. We give them money. They'll get a stipend. Some of them use it for ramen noodles, and some of them put it into their company. They get lawyers. They get Deloitte business advisors. They get leadership coaches. Pretty much everything that you would need to start an early stage business and really sort of by the end of being here know at least how you're going to be making revenue, or who have improved your business model and be making more revenue, just going up that next rung of the ladder.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it's
super fun. And I get to hang out with 16 of the world's most exciting social entrepreneurs and 8 of the world's best artists every year. That's my job.
That's pretty legit.
I know.
I would be protecting that job very keenly.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it.
So you're the founder of Halcyon? Co-founder?
Yeah. So my co-founder is, in her own right, an incredible biotech entrepreneur. Uh-huh. She was the first woman to graduate from Kyoto University with a degree in biochemistry. Uh-huh. Her name's Dr. Sachiko Cunha. And she, has started and successfully exited a couple of biotech companies. Uh-huh. With some of that money, she purchased Halcyon House in 2011. And
the
building.
Okay.
It started life in 1787 as Benjamin Stoddard's house. He was the first Secretary of the Navy. Mm-hmm. So
I took a picture of the plaque outside.
Yes, you know all about it. Very revolutionary roots, and we feel like we're upholding those. So she bought it in 2011, and she knew she didn't want to create a dusty historic house mausoleum. It was too big for her to live in. She decided she was going to turn it over to young innovators to have time and space. And that's when she and I met, and we started to explore, okay, but what does that mean? And how can that be really effective? And what would we build around that as a methodology? Mm-hmm. So then we started to talk to people in the space, and by that I mean really broadly, certainly foundations, the State Department, the UN, but also, successful social entrepreneurs, Echoing Green, Ashoka, and really with the objective of learning what was already out there, what was working, what hadn't worked. That was always really useful information. Mm-hmm. And, maybe what people weren't doing yet, where they thought we could fill a gap and differentiate, be useful, not, replicative. And from that came this idea of like, okay, we'll be the crazy ones that create a dorm for, risk takers. Do you know what it's like to run a dorm for risk takers?
No, I'm sure a lot of RAs have their own take on what that is.
It is,
but it's a slightly different.
Crazy. Like by nature, artists and entrepreneurs are rule breakers and risk takers.
Yeah,
they're so wonderful and so creative. But yeah, it's always fun.
So I'm always interested in this, and I think this is kind of the ethos of the show. Is there was this transaction that happened, purchased the house.
Yep.
And was it already an idea, or it was like, I'm buying this house and I'm not sure what it's going to be, and then you were part of the conveation? Like,
she definitely knew for sure that because she has a big belief in time and space, that everyone needs both physical space and ideally inspirational space, but more time than any of us really get. Like, what does it look like when you take all of the stress and the burdens off someone and give them actual headspace and like real time, like dawn till dusk to think? And that part she knew, right? She knew she wanted to use this building for that, but we didn't have any of the framework around it. Like we didn't know that Deloitte would be interested in working with us and Arnold Porter would be interested in working with us, and we didn't know what the ideal time frame would be or how we would select these people or what we'd be selecting for. All of that we sort of pulled together afterwards. Met the incredible Ryan Ross, who jumped in and really, really formatted what the selections and applications would look like.
Yeah.
And then, so that was for the incubator. We launched that in September 2014.
To 2011 to 2014 was just like envisioning.
Truly.
Which is interesting. The sort of the 3-year mark, that rhythm, I feel like isn't uncommon for ideas. Like it takes.
Oh, really?
It just takes time to lift something off the ground.
It's so funny you say that because we launched Halcyon as its own nonprofit. Yeah. Which is comprises the incubator, the Arts Lab, and By the People Festival in 2017. So 3 years after. The incubator formed, that also happened. So you might be onto something there.
No, I just find it interesting with building the communities that I'm in and the work that I'm doing. And when you talk to people, I know a handful of people in the restaurant space. Generally, it takes time before things are really rolling. And whether it's that idea to launch or it's idea to launch to, this is actually going to last.
Yeah. No, I think, a lot of my projects follow a 3-year timeline. In fact, I've even used it to explain how the project will evolve. For example, the festival that we just started, the By the People Festival, when I was trying to convince partners to come on board with us and be part of this, thing that no one was sure if it would actually succeed or, I would always say, listen, year one, inaugural year, it's going to be great, but we're going to make all the mistakes. Yeah. Right? And then every mistake you can make. But we're not going to be stupid. We're going to learn from those. And year 2 is the tidying up year. Right? And I think this might be part of the evolution that everyone goes through. Year 2, we will register what those mistakes were. We will fix the ones that we can. We'll eliminate the things that didn't work. We'll improve, all of that year 2 refining stuff. Yeah. And then year 3 through 5, that's growth. Right. So and I think it's very similar, certainly, to a lot of the enterprises that we see come through here is like, okay, they've got a great idea. They test it, they refine it, they sort of pilot it, launch their beta. Once they've realized they've got sort of a, something that, has these external market validation signals, then they can really sort of, go out there and hopefully get some revenue, and then you go after investment, and it's a very similar process of iteration and then hopefully explosion.
Yeah, the goal. Yeah, a little bit of the hockey stick.
The dream. It's funny though. Everyone always sort of like is angling for that, and at the same time worrying about what happens if there's never the demand. Very few people actually prepare for what they're going to do if they get that sudden demand.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I've had conversations with people where people don't prepare for being successful.
Yes.
They're doing their work, so badly. They're growing, they're
It's almost like they don't actually believe it'll happen, so they don't actually prepare for it. But if you're not prepared for how you take 5 widgets a day to 500 widgets a day, it's as big a mistake as, making 500 widgets a day and only selling 5, if not bigger.
Yeah.
And it's funny, artists have the same problem. You'd never think about it, right? Like the corollaries between two very different fields. But let's look at like Amy Sherald, right? Who did the wonderful portrait of Michelle Obama, right? So she was, producing her work, and then she made that, and then everyone wants an Amy Sherald.
Yeah.
What does she do? Does she churn out a bunch of work and try and take advantage of all of the interest, and possibly like take less money for each of her pieces than she could? Or does she sort of, and that's when you either need a really great agent or you need to have some business savvy. A lot of artists don't. Yeah. But you wouldn't think of entrepreneurs and artists having to deal with the same sort of things, but they absolutely do.
No, that's a really interesting, I think that's a really interesting point. And there is a balance of being sort of the performer, being in performance mode, but then also thinking about it from a sort of like zooming out and looking at what you're working on. And that prep, one of the things that I talk about, or I've been talking about more, is this idea of scaling yourself. People prepare to scale their companies, but they don't prepare to scale themselves alongside, because your company requires more from you as it grows, hopefully. And to your point with artists, like everything requires more from you if what you're working on grows, whether it's an audience, whether it's, like a customer. So it is very interesting, and it takes a lot. Hi all, quick break to tell you about the Founder's Mind Plus. It's all the interviews of guests you love, plus bonus episodes with additional stories and anecdotes, shout-outs and future episodes of founding funders that could be you, and opportunities to get some cool swag from the show. You can upgrade by following the link in the show notes or go to thefoundersmind.com/plus. Thanks for following along. Back to the show. So kind of coming back to Halcyon.
Yes.
And cultivating this community of founders and artists. And this is year 8? We're entering into year 4, 2014. This is year 5.
It's year 4 in practice. We're just about to have our 10th cohort. So by June, we'll technically be through like year 5. But Halcyon, the 501c3, has only been around for 2 years. Okay. So you work with a lot of founders. Yes.
And you've had this year, like you said, we'll have completed your 10th cohort this year.
Yes.
What's a piece of advice out there? We have founders that listen. We might have aspiring founders. We might have people that work in an office that, are looking to learn a little something. What's a piece of advice that you received in this journey with Halcyon that you found very impactful for you?
It's funny that you were just talking about blind spots, because I think that, certainly for me, we grew this thing quite quickly over, if you really look at it. I think in 2013, it was basically me and my co-founder. And then, now in 2018, we've got 15 people, and I've got a board of 22.
That's a big board.
It is a big board. They're fantastic. It's actually a board of 9 and then an honorary board of,
more
11. I think that I've had to learn about myself in order to keep pace with the evolution and the growth of the company in exactly the way that we've been talking about. Which means that you have to then look at some of the things about yourself that you don't particularly want to acknowledge, and the faster that you can get through the process of first being in denial of blind spots and then actually acknowledging, I'm really not great at, financial spreadsheets, the better then you can move and quickly address them and make the changes that are for the best of the organization. One thing I always do when I'm like stuck on a decision, particularly, around personnel, where there's feelings involved from both sides and things like that, I always come down to what is best for Halcyon, right? Not me, not this other person. What's best for Halcyon right now? Either our internal culture, our potential future growth, our public perception, like what's the right decision from those vantage points. So that's always, I think, a useful thing to remember, is to like frame things in the context of the organization, to get outside of yourself, and definitely like address your blind spots with by hiring other people
Yeah.
that can do them. I recently hired a CFO because my blind spot, I'll share it openly because I've gone through that psychological work, is, I'm great at bringing in money and sort of like bringing people around a cause. And I like to think I'm pretty good at implementing a positive culture. It's a pretty happy place to work. But while I'm interested in the financial health of Halcyon from a sustainability standpoint and being very responsible about people's donations and leaving behind a healthy organization with good reserves and no loans and all of that stuff. I'm very interested in that. I'm just not the best person in the world to do the kind of strategic financial projecting that is required at this level, right? I could do it when it was, 3 of us, but sure. I can't do it now.
Yeah, it's a different situation.
It is. So, we just went through the whole process of hiring a CFO, and now we're in it, and and they are guiding me, and I am leaning on them heavily. It's great.
So how did you? I think that's great. I mean, I think identifying your blind spots and being aware of them, and whether you can fill that blind spot with someone else or you just acknowledge that that's there and you can work with it instead of ignoring it.
Yeah.
Do you have a way that you highlight those blind spots? How do you discover them? Do people bring them up for you? I mean, what did you do, or do you do?
I think it's a combination. Sometimes people bring them to my attention. Like I said, sometimes I listen right away, and sometimes it takes a second person or the same person coming to me twice. But I really do try to sort of hear. And sometimes it's just, that practice of being alone with yourself and your dark side and your light side, and really kind of trying to know, ahead of yourself what it is you're going to need to address. Mm-hmm. There's a really useful thing actually that you probably know, but maybe some of the listeners don't. The whole process of thought, feeling, action, outcome. Mm-hmm. And I definitely believe that this is true. Whatever dominates your thoughts are going to be how it's going to dominate how you feel. And that feeling will basically cause you to act in a certain way, and potentially in certain situations, and that will derive your outcomes. Yeah. And so if you work backwards, if you're getting an outcome potentially consistently that you don't like maybe, again, let's use a human resources example, maybe there's one team member that they're just not rising to their full potential or something, but yet your conversations with them haven't been successful, right? Let's say that's the outcome you want to change. Then stepping back through that and thinking, okay, well, what actions am I taking when I'm with them? What does that look like? Really examining it. And sometimes it helps to go back further. What's my feeling when I enter a conversation with them? Yeah. What might I be projecting? Yeah. Where is that taking me? How is that making me act? Maybe I don't think that they can do it, and therefore maybe I'm saying things that aren't encouraging, or whatever it ends up being. Yeah. And I swear you can always trace it back to that original thought of maybe I think I'm not great at budgets, and therefore I feel ashamed and scared of approaching them, and therefore I avoid them, and therefore the outcome's shit. Yeah. Right? So it's, I just find it very, very helpful to constantly be tracing back from outcomes that I'm not thrilled about.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you don't have to work with me as a coach if you're listening. You just listen to that one segment, and Kate just reverse engineered, pretty much the essential coaching focus. What are the outcomes and results you're getting, and working backwards? It's great. I love it. No, it's really good. And I agree.
Yeah, no, I hold that pretty to heart all the time.
And I actually think it's really interesting when you talk about it and when you think about it from a theoretical standpoint, it's very simple.
Yeah.
That's not complicated.
But you can even forget it on a daily basis.
You can forget it.
Yeah.
And it is uncomfortable to do that work.
100%. Every time it doesn't get easier as you get older.
I always find it interesting, and I have a mixed relationship with working out, but people that work out a lot or focus on their body a lot, but still have issues sort of on that, on that psychological, like how they work through their day. There's always that direct connection for me. You go and like you work your muscles till they burn, and then you rest, and then you do the same thing the next day, and then they rest, and you do it for a long, maybe your whole life. It's the same thing with some of these frameworks.
Yeah.
But we don't, we have trouble challenging ourselves to say, this is going to be, it might be uncomfortable, it might be awkward, it might change the status of relationships that I have with people.
But the more you practice it, I think the more innate.
Oh yeah,
it becomes.
It becomes a habit. Hopefully.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. The goal. Who's a founder that you admire and why? I know you work with a lot of awesome founders.
Yeah.
So
I admire so many of our fellows, but I do sort of feel like it might be like uncool of me to call just one of them out.
You could do someone out. You can do someone outside of the group. Yeah, I'm not suggesting pick your favorite child.
No,
although we know it's the one that plays guitar and doesn't want to be loved just for their guitar skills.
We actually have a series here called Fast Forward, which is Marla Beck interviewing incredible visionary female founders.
Yeah, Nick was just telling me
almost
about it.
Every one of them I admire greatly, and including Marla herself. Yeah. We just concluded the last series with an interview with Sheila Johnson.
Okay.
That was fascinating. I mean, she just talked about, by virtue of sort of being of mixed race, she found herself stuck in two worlds. She wasn't accepted by either world.
Yes.
And then also all of the challenges that she went through every time she started a business, and the people that around her that doubted that she had to ignore. And it was a really impactful, I definitely admire her. I admire my co-founder, Dr. Cunha, very much. She's taught me an awful lot. She's taught me, I used to be stubborn to a fault. I think I've honed that a little bit more tightly now. And, I think the flip side of stubbornness is persistence. Right? Yeah. You're just going to drive forward, and there's good stuff about that. But sometimes it does mean that you will find yourself climbing a mountain. Her big analogy is knowing where you're going and climb a mountain. And I would hit a big boulder and just keep pushing against the boulder when all I should be doing is taking a step back so that I can see a different pathway around the boulder, right? And she really taught me how to look for different paths instead of continuing to bang my head on the same immovable object, which is a really useful tool.
Cool.
Yeah.
You have a lot of books.
Some of them are gifts.
I see some design, some really...
We've got Kentucky Bourbon Whiskey,
some really fancy-looking coffee table
Designed
books.
for good, yes.
Are you reading anything right now besides the picture books?
I wish I had time to read. You know what is my... the thing that I read the most frequently is the New Yorker magazine. My mom bought me a subscription, and I relished that. Yeah. I have 1,000 books sitting on my bedside table that are not getting read.
So it's not just me.
Yeah, thank God, please.
Okay, good.
You.
Yeah, I mean, I have a
You've got a
bookshelf.
6-week-old, so you've really got an excuse.
But even before that, it's a running joke. Like whenever we purge things in my house, my wife is always looking at all the books that I have that I haven't read. She's an avid reader, and I always defend the books and say, can we keep them? Maybe I'll read them. Maybe they're aspirational. I don't know. Yeah,
articles is about what I can handle.
I do read a lot of articles.
I can fit one in between like work tasks, and
yes,
that's okay. I can do that.
Okay, good.
No, we both validated each other.
Okay, good. Exactly. That's perfect. Worth it. What is something that you learned recently that blew your mind?
Okay, it's gonna sound obnoxious. Like literally, I don't even know how to make this not sound obnoxious. I was like hanging out with the Dalai Lama. No, I really was. I went to Dharamshala, and I was part of a contingent we went and hung out with the Dalai Lama, and we had a long conversation with him about compassion and how to generate more compassion in the world. And he, someone asked him how you stay warm-hearted to people, particularly who may not have your best interests at heart, or may, have shown malice, or, you just really don't get along with or see eye to eye with. How do you stay open and compassionate to those people? to what degree do you protect yourself and those around you from negative people? And he said something really interesting, that in the Tibetan culture, his translator talked to him for a long time so they could figure this one out, because he was like, what does he mean warm-hearted? Warm-hearted. He said there's no corollary word for warm-hearted. It doesn't exist. We don't think about people in a way that involves our body. He said the thinking in Tibet is warmth of mind. Like you have, you make sure that your thoughts about those people are as kind and generous as they can be. So like a generous mind or a generous spirit. And that reframing was so sort of explosive for me. And I'm really, and it's funny how sort of like, again, just switching how you think can even change how you present your body to someone. And then suddenly, they could have just misconstrued you and you just started a whole new cycle for that relationship. It's just really... So yeah, that was probably the most mind-blowing thing. Plus just meeting the freaking Dalai Lama.
Yeah, I mean, like, tangentially, my mind is blown. I'm like, this is 1 degree, 2 degrees of separation, perfect.
He is so incredible, yeah. Everything everyone says about him, about like his aura, it feels like he just changed a thermostat when he walks in the room. I mean, it's really incredible.
I've seen him speak a couple times when he's come through DC. It was a while ago.
He's 82. They said he can't travel anymore, which is quite sad.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that you just mentioned, though, this idea of reframing. And I think this is one of the things that I love about coaching work. I'm not, in the work that I do, I don't show up to tell people what they should be doing or how they should be doing things. I'm not a consultant. I'm not here to hand down a solution. And in the conversations, being able to ask a question or introduce something for someone to think about in a different way, and then it changes something, because it's through dialogue, for me is one of the coolest things about coaching. And it happens outside of the coaching world, like you just shared. And when you're talking to someone and they make you think about something differently, it can happen all over. But that's, for me, the essence of coaching is, let's just look at something differently or think about it differently. And what does that do for you, the performer, or the, as the client? What do you want to do with that? So that's really cool. And I think it's important to preface the way you said it, I liked it. I don't know how to say this without it being obnoxious.
Oh, it sounds so obnoxious, doesn't it? It's just like,
like Owen Wilson
when
and
I
Zoolander.
go on my private jet.
What is something, and there's a lot of things, but what's the one thing that comes to your mind right now that the world could really use?
Oh, wow. Gosh. Maybe a big crisis just to really get us to get out of, and you could argue we just had one with the government shutdown, but I worry that it's going to take something even bigger, because I just think that there are so many looming things that we are not able to act on quickly enough as individuals, that is going to need massive systemic change. And that systemic change will only come when there is enough of a crisis. Otherwise, people are just too comfortable still. You're
saying we need a bigger kick in the butt.
I worry that we do, unfortunately.
Okay.
I know that's awful, but right. Like, I mean, I think that with the way that AI is coming, I think we need to have a very serious conversation about universal basic income.
Got it.
That no one's ready to have yet.
Yeah.
I think that, we should be having much more serious conversations about climate change. I think I just read an article about how 2019 is the highest CO2 levels on record, and we're inching towards that point of no return where the amount of CO2 will create it, too warm an environment for forests to thrive, and then the forests start shutting down, and they're the things that can get rid of the CO2, and then there literally is no turning back. There's very little else that worries me like that does, right? In terms of thinking about my children's future on the planet. I think that, all of the political strife and all of this noise around who said what and who did this today, it's just noise, and those problems are so small in comparison.
Yeah.
So, I think we might need a crisis. It's awful, isn't it?
I mean, I'm not going to dispute that, and I think that it's interesting also in the context of what we're experiencing domestically to think that we haven't had a big kick in the butt yet.
Right.
But there is, I mean, there are definitely bigger things that are happening.
It's the only way you can get the will, though, sometimes, I think, as a big society to actually make the change that's necessary. But I worry about how big that crisis would need to be, For sure. Yeah.
We're going to spin it right back, because I'm just to close it out. What are you excited about, in the coming months and even maybe a year or two with Halcyon? Like, what are you looking forward to?
There's some things that I can't quite talk about.
Sure.
But I'll just sort of allude to the fact that we are both expanding the resources that we have on offer to the existing entrepreneurs, particularly those that are on the back end of Halcyon Incubator. So you might be able to guess what a mechanism might be that we could do that. The other thing that we're doing is really examining a lot of really interesting opportunities to syndicate our IP in other places around the world. There's a lot of interest and desire for that.
Is your IP like the programming?
Yeah, all the stuff that we've developed about, how do you do both an immersive program for entrepreneurs, but also a successful curricula for social entrepreneurs. And curricula is far too formal a term, but
sure.
All that stuff that we've developed along the way about how to create a successful social enterprise when it does require being diligent both on the impact front and on the profit side. So it's doubly hard, and you're going to have to double sell investors. There's a lot there, right? So, we started having these summer intensives last summer. We had all women social entrepreneurs from Saudi Arabia, which was amazing. And we had entrepreneurs from South Korea. And there's a lot of other places in the world that are just very interested in some kind of, franchise
sure.
of Halcyon's methodology, which is great. So we're just examining which opportunities are the right ones for us right now. And then, like I alluded to earlier, we started this cool festival, which is, we call By the People, and it is basically an arts and dialogue festival for DC focused on the themes of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so our artists get to hang out alongside big name artists on the same slate, and we fill the city with cool immersive experiences and visual arts installations and performances, and hopefully as we grow, create a really good dialogue platform that our entrepreneurs can also take part in, and it'll just wrap around Halcyon, become the new South by / Burning Man.
Oh, in DC?
That's what I'm hoping.
That would be way less expensive to participate in.
Exactly. You're right here. Yeah.
That's great. Do you have a platform that you're talking about the things that you're learning and working on, or are you sort of Halcyon is how do people follow along? And what's going on? How do people check in? How do people learn more? Yeah, no, I'm not great yet, and it's one of my sort of resolutions to be a little bit better about writing. So I truly love, and I'm grateful for opportunities like this to kind of digest some of this stuff. Cool.
But we also really try to feature our fellows. So we don't, Halcyon is the support mechanism, sure. Right? And definitely trying to get our fellows work front and center is usually our biggest focus. So what's the website? Do people follow on social? Thank you. It's halcyonhealth.org, and it's at Halcyon Inspires on Instagram. Great. Thank you so much. No, thank you. This was amazing. This was really fun. Thanks. Awesome. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Founder's Mind. Check back weekly for full episodes. If you like what you're hearing, sign up for The Founder's Mind Plus for 2 to 4 bonus episodes each month in addition to the full episodes and other dope benefits. Sign up for The Founder's Mind Plus through the episode notes or by going to thefoundersmind.com and clicking the plus link. To make sure you don't miss any awesome wisdom from guests and stay up to date on the most recent episodes of the show, be sure to visit thefoundersmind.com. You can also follow along on social at The Founder's Mind. Last but not least, thank you to Roy Matz for the music on this show and his dope editing skills that make The Founder's Mind possible. Until next time, take care. In a world going
through all of this insanity and try to bring new ideas, make them a reality. Illuminate in the thoughts, make it a priority to implement what you learn. What you get is what you be. In a world full of noise, hard to find that clarity to try to lead subtly, never full of vanity, and try to change something small or try to change humanity. Power forward through the dark, founder's mind is what you see. Founder's mind is what you see. Founder's mind is what you see.